First of all, I'm joined by a Victorian MP, Victorian Senator for the Liberal Party, Jane Hume. Jane Hume, thanks for your time today.
Good morning, Tom.
Can I ask you, first of all, I know you've been busy in this area of superannuation, the changes made by Kelly O'Dwyer, that life insurance, compulsory life insurance, has been a big issue. Apparently there's going to be an overhaul there. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, the announcements that Kelly O'Dwyer, the Minister for Revenue and Financial Services, made yesterday are a culmination of a number of reports to government that have been made over the years, and one of those recommendations was that APRA be tasked with the job of assessing ways that we could make life insurance and disability insurance opt out within superannuation, so that life insurance and disability insurance, where unnecessary, don't eat into and erode the balances of superannuants. And this is a really important reform, but it's one of many reforms announced in the package yesterday, which include things like far more transparent reporting by superannuation funds for members, including where members' funds are being spent, annual members' meetings to report to members in the same way a listed company would report to shareholders, increased APRA oversight, and also, importantly, closing a loophole that has allowed unscrupulous employers to use voluntary contributions to superannuation as part of their superannuation obligations.
Well, we'll see where all of that goes. Of course, a few moves to be made as well on those default super accounts. I want to get your thoughts on the inequality issue that Labor is now pushing. Are voters telling you that they feel this is a bigger issue and becoming a bigger one in Australia?
Well, I think that, you know, the rhetoric of inequality and fairness coming from the Labor Party is extraordinarily hypocritical. It really is a shroud for a redistributionist agenda, and probably, you know, I think that we find with Labor governments, when they become devoid of ideas, they start getting into this conversation about class warfare to try and, you know, mobilise their front line. So I don't think that the issue of and fairness, which of course is an extraordinarily subjective term in itself, is actually going to resonate the way that Bill Shorten would hope it would.
What about this issue of family trust? You can have a situation where someone has a small business, they can give a distribution to one of their children over the age of 18 that has no actual part in the business, but to minimise their own tax. Is that something that could at least be looked at?
Well, I think that this is, you know, I think as Mr Shorten himself said, you know, the devil is in the detail. We know that Mr Shorten intends to make dramatic changes to negative gearing. We know he's going to make dramatic changes to capital gains tax, potentially repeal the company tax cuts that have been made by the Turnbull government that have been so well received. But he's also targeting things like family trusts that are used by, you know, not just small businesses but also by farmers. Potentially he's talking about repealing R&D tax concessions that are used by innovators. You know, these could be quite dramatic
But what about that, just that particular proposition I put to you, that someone could have a small business? It doesn't have to be something that their child works for at all, has any part in, and yet gets, you know, a distribution that they minimise the amount of tax the person pays. Is that something that could at least be looked at, that one small element of this?
Well, I think that, you know, there is always room for tax reforms to ensure that taxes are, you know, easily paid, that minimisation schemes are limited. But importantly, things like family trusts are not only used for tax purposes, they're also used for things like asset protection. So I think that the unintended consequences of changes to any particular tax structure should be considered in this process.
I want to get your thoughts on the second part of the news poll out today on Tony Abbott and what he should do. The question was actually premised after Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull sit down and try to sort out their differences. Now, 48% of respondents, the highest overall response, said that he should stay on the backbench but stop commenting. Do you think he's going to heed that advice from some voters at least?
Well, I think the advice to stop commenting is something that that we should all heed. I'm not going to comment on news polls. I think that, you know, reading the tea leaves is probably something better left to you guys, to the journalists and to the commentariat. What I will say, though, is that from where I sit in the room, the coalition is united behind the Prime Minister and is focused on delivering and developing good policy and delivering good policy, and the polls will reflect that eventually.
All right, we'll see where it heads. Jane Hume, thank you for that. We do have